Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. This time, we're exploring what it really means to be a good neighbor.
Ooh.
Beyond just the houses and fences.
Right.
Our guide for this is Frederick Osei-Manu's article, The Art of Neighboring.
Okay.
But before we even get into Manu's take on this, I want to kind of start with you, the listener.
Yeah.
When you hear the word neighbor, who pops into your head?
Mm-hmm.
Is it just the people that live next door? Or is there something more to it?
That's interesting that you say that, because Manu actually challenges that common assumption that, neighbor just equals proximity. He argues that good neighboring is a two-way street.
Right.
You get back what you put in. And it actually reminds me of a quote by Harry S. Truman.
Okay.
He said, all will concede that in order to have good neighbors, we must also be good neighbors. That applies in every field of human endeavor. Oh. So are we all just living in a giant neighborhood?
I like where you're going with that.
Yeah.
The whole world is one giant neighborhood.
Right.
That's a really interesting take. And it's almost like Manu's setting the stage for some kind of social experiment.
Yeah.
With this whole concept of neighboring.
Right.
But before we go changing the world, I want to get back to the basics.
Okay.
Manu's first point in this article is all about loving people.
Yeah, and it's deeper than just a general sense of love thy neighbor.
Right.
He's talking about accepting people as they are, warts and all, showing genuine warmth and affection.
Okay.
Even when it's hard.
So accepting people, flaws and all. I mean, I'm all for being friendly, but is it realistic to expect that level of, unconditional love?
Right.
Especially in today's world where it seems like everyone is so quick to judge.
That's a valid question, and this isn't about being best friends with everyone on the block.
Okay.
More like choosing to approach interactions with a basic level of respect and understanding. Think about those times you've been struggling, maybe having a bad day. Having a neighbor who offers a kind word or a helping hand, even if you're not super close,
right,
can make a world of difference.
Yeah, I guess that goes back to that two-way street idea.
Yeah.
You're more likely to receive kindness if you're putting it out there too.
Absolutely.
It creates this positive feedback loop. But how do we put this loving thy neighbor into action? Does Manu give us any practical tips?
His second point is all about active listening.
Okay.
And before you say, duh, we all listen.
Right.
Think about it. Are we really listening? Or are we just waiting for our turn to talk?
Yeah.
Manu's talking about truly engaging with what someone is saying, especially during tough times.
Now that you put it that way, I realize I'm probably guilty of the waiting to talk thing more often than I'd like to admit.
Right.
It's like we're so busy thinking about our response that we miss what the other person is really trying to say.
Exactly. And think of it like this. Imagine your neighbor's going through a divorce and they just need to vent. You're not offering advice. You're just being a sounding board. That's the power of active listening.
Right.
It's a gift we can give to our neighbors, a way to show we care that they're not alone.
You're right. It's such a simple but powerful way to connect. Just being present and truly listening without judgment. It's amazing how much that can mean to someone, but does it have to be all serious heart-to-hearts all the time?
Right.
Are there other ways to be a good neighbor?
Absolutely. In fact, Manu makes it clear that being a good neighbor doesn't always require grand gestures or profound pronouncements. Sometimes it's the simple things that speak volumes. He even uses the phrase, love is the root, neighboring is the fruit.
I like that.
Yeah.
It suggests that neighboring is the outward expression of love, but what does that fruit actually look like?
Right.
What are some tangible examples?
It can be as simple as offering a listening ear, lending a helping hand with groceries, or even just a friendly smile when you pass on the street. It's about those everyday acts of kindness that show you're paying attention, that you care.
It's funny how we often overcomplicate things, thinking we need to do something extraordinary to make a difference.
Right.
But Manu's reminding us that sometimes the smallest gestures can have the biggest impact.
Absolutely.
It's not about moving mountains. It's about offering a hand when someone's carrying a heavy load, even if it's just for a moment.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's where the ripple effect comes, and these small acts of neighboring can spread outwards and create a more positive and supportive community. I actually saw this firsthand when I was living in Chicago.
Okay.
There was this elderly woman who lived a few doors down from me. And she didn't have any family nearby, and she struggled to get around, but the whole neighborhood rallied around her.
Oh, wow.
Bringing her meals, helping her with errands, just checking in on her regularly.
That's so heartwarming.
Yeah.
It's like that old saying, it takes a village,
Right.
or in this case, a neighborhood.
Exactly.
It's proof that we don't have to go it alone, that there's strength in community. But I have to ask, what about those times when you're on the receiving end of those small acts of kindness?
Yeah.
I know I can be a bit stubborn, like I can handle this myself.
Right.
Is it okay to accept help? Or are we supposed to be the strong, independent neighbors?
That's a great question, and it brings up an important point. Being a good neighbor is a two-way street. It's not just about giving, but also about being gracious and allowing others to give to us.
Right.
Sometimes accepting help is the kindest thing we can do for someone else. It allows them to experience the joy of giving and strengthens that bond between neighbors.
That's a good point. Sometimes by refusing help, we're actually depriving someone else of the opportunity to be a good neighbor.
Yeah.
It's almost like we need to practice receiving kindness as much as we practice giving it.
Absolutely.
But how do we know what kind of help to offer? Is it always obvious, or are there subtle cues we should be looking for?
It's a mix of both, really. Sometimes people will outright ask for help, and that's easy. But often it's about being observant and attuned to the needs of those around us. Maybe you notice your neighbor struggling to carry groceries, or their lawn is overgrown, or they just seem a bit down.
Yeah.
These can be subtle signs that they could use a helping hand.
It sounds like being a good neighbor requires a certain level of, I don't know, mindfulness, maybe?
Yeah.
Like we need to be present in our surroundings and pay attention to what's going on around us.
Precisely. And that's something Manu emphasizes in his article, the importance of being aware of our surroundings and the people who share them. It's about shifting our focus from our own individual needs to the needs of the community as a whole.
So it's not just about what we can get from our neighbors, but what we can contribute to make our neighborhoods better places for everyone. But let's be real, not everyone is going to be on board with this whole neighboring thing, right?
Of course.
We've all had experiences with those less than ideal neighbors.
Human behavior is complex, and there will always be variations in how people interact within a community.
Yeah.
Some people might be more naturally inclined toward neighborliness, while others might be more reserved or even skeptical.
Yeah, I guess that goes back to Mana's point about accepting people as they are.
Right.
It doesn't mean we have to be best friends with everyone.
Right.
We can still choose to approach interactions with a baseline of respect and understanding.
Exactly. And remember, we can't control how others behave, but we can control our own actions. By choosing to be good neighbors ourselves, we're setting a positive example and contributing to a more caring and supportive environment.
Yeah.
Who knows, maybe our actions will inspire others to do the same.
Okay, so it's not about forcing everyone to conform to some good neighbor standard, but rather about leading by example and creating a ripple effect of kindness. But I'm curious, in a world that's increasingly digital and disconnected, how do we even foster that sense of community in the first place?
Right.
Is it even possible to be a good neighbor in a world where people are glued to their phones and rarely interact face to face?
That's a really important question, and it gets to the heart of the challenge we face in modern society.
Yeah.
Technology has undoubtedly changed the way we interact, and it's easy to feel isolated and disconnected, even when surrounded by people.
Yeah, you can live in a building with dozens of people and still feel completely alone.
Right.
So how do we bridge that gap? How do we create genuine connections in a world that seems designed to keep us apart?
Well, I think it starts by being intentional about creating opportunities for interaction.
Okay.
Instead of retreating into our digital bubbles, we need to actively seek out ways to connect with those around us. It could be as simple as striking up a conversation with someone in the elevator, organizing a neighborhood potluck, or even just smiling and saying hello when you pass someone on the street.
Those are all great ideas.
Yeah.
It's like we need to relearn those basic social skills that have gotten lost in the digital age.
Right.
But does it really make a difference? I mean, one smile or a brief chat isn't going to magically transform a neighborhood.
You're right. It's not about overnight transformations. It's about small, consistent actions that over time can build trust, foster a sense of belonging, and create a more connected community.
Right.
Think of it like planting seeds.
Oh.
Each interaction, however small, is a seed of connection that has the potential to grow into something beautiful.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
It's like we're all gardeners in our own communities, tending to the social fabric and nurturing those connections that make life more meaningful.
Exactly. And the more we nurture those connections, the more our neighborhoods will flourish. It's about creating a culture of caring and reciprocity, one interaction at a time.
This has been so insightful.
Good.
I'm already feeling inspired to up my neighboring game.
Well,
Before we get too carried away with our neighborhood beautification projects, let's bring it back to Manu's article. We've covered loving people and active listening. What other nuggets of wisdom does he have to share?
his third point focuses on the idea that being a good neighbor is an ongoing journey, not a destination. We're all constantly learning and evolving, and there will always be opportunities to improve our neighboring skills.
So it's not about being perfect, but about making a conscious effort to be kind, compassionate, and supportive within our communities.
Exactly.
And who knows, maybe our actions will inspire others to do the same.
Precisely. It's about fostering a culture of caring and reciprocity, one small act of neighboring at a time. Now, before we move on, I'd like to pose a question to our listener.
Okay.
What's one small act of neighboring that you can do this week?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Really gets the wheels turning.
Yeah.
I'm already thinking about that elderly couple across the street.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I could offer to rake their leaves or shovel their snow this winter.
There you go. It doesn't have to be anything grand or time-consuming.
Right.
Even a small gesture can make a big difference.
You know, it's funny. We've been talking about this whole neighboring thing as if it's some new concept.
Yeah.
But it's really about getting back to basics, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Like back in the day when communities were smaller and more tightly knit, everyone knew their neighbors, they looked out for each other, they helped each other out.
Absolutely.
It seems like we've kind of lost that somewhere along the way.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And maybe by embracing this idea of neighboring, we can create those little pockets of connection, those micro communities,
Right.
even in the midst of a big impersonal world.
Exactly. It's about building those bridges of understanding and support, one interaction at a time. It's about creating a world where we see each other not as strangers, but as fellow travelers on this journey called life.
Wow, that's beautifully put. It's like we're all in this together.
Right.
And by being good neighbors, we're acknowledging that interconnectedness and creating a more compassionate and supportive world.
And think about the ripple effect.
Yeah.
If we each commit to being better neighbors,
Yeah.
imagine how that could transform our communities, our cities, even our world.
Okay. I'm officially on board the neighboring train.
Good.
But before we all rush out to bake cookies for the entire block, let's recap some of the key takeaways from our deep dive into Frederick Osei-Manu's The Art of Neighboring.
Okay.
We've learned that good neighbors are essential, and being one involves genuine care, active listening, and small but meaningful actions.
And we've also explored how these small acts can create a ripple effect, transforming not just individual lives, but entire communities.
Right, and most importantly, we've been challenged to think about how we can each be better neighbors in our own unique ways.
Now, before we sign off, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder.
Okay.
What would your neighborhood look like if everyone embraced this idea of neighboring?
Ooh, that's a powerful image to leave us with. Imagine a world where every neighborhood felt like a true community, a place where people felt connected, supported, and loved. Maybe it's not just a dream. Maybe it's something we can create together, one act of kindness, one listening ear, one friendly smile at a time.
And if you're inspired to explore this idea further, I highly recommend checking out Frederick Osei-Manu's full article, The Art of Neighboring. It's a quick read, but it packs a powerful punch and offers some practical tips on how to cultivate the art of neighboring in your own life.
Absolutely. It's definitely worth a read, folks.
Well,
That brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of neighboring Everend. We hope you've enjoyed this exploration, and more importantly, that you've been inspired to think about how you can bring a little more neighborly love into your own life and community.
remember, even the smallest acts of kindness can have a ripple effect, creating a more positive and connected world.
So go out there and be the neighbor you wish you had. And until next time, happy neighboring.